As we mentioned, tariffs are part of a strategy from the Trump administration to get a better trade deal with China and curb illegal immigration at the southern border. As for its effectiveness and the consequences it carries, we got insight from University of Arizona economist George Hammond. It appears that the U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement may be in a holding pattern. Could that also be said for investors on both sides of the border, distributors as well?
I think so. I think everybody is waiting to see what happens with the current round of tariffs. Will they move forward? Will they not? Will they last long enough to have a really significant negative impact on trade and overall welfare? You know, as we impose these tariffs, it raises prices for consumers. That makes all of us worse off. Also raises prices on inputs into the U.S. production process because the supply chain is so integrated. And when that happens, that makes U.S. producers less competitive internationally. So indirectly, us imposing tariffs on Mexican imports makes our exports less competitive internationally, and that on its own will tend to reduce our export performance. And if Mexico and China raise their tariffs on U.S. goods, then that further impedes our competitiveness, and that affects our long-term growth, makes us all a little poorer in the long run.
The Arizona Chamber of Commerce recently released a figure. 6,000 jobs in the state of Arizona rely on this relationship with Mexico. What's likely to become of those should these tariffs continue as they've been threatened?
Well, if the tariffs move forward, that will increase the costs for consumers in Arizona, and it will cost us jobs, and those jobs can become significant. So that would be individuals in Arizona that are out of work.
It's not uncommon in many of our day-to-day to threaten or to say, if you don't do this, I'm going to do that. In the business world, does it happen more than we think, that perhaps it's just not played out the way many of us are privy to?
Well, it certainly does happen. It's, in business, there are difficult negotiations that need to happen sometimes. What would be preferable is if we could keep trade on its own separate track, which has been the approach over the past 20 or 30 years or so. That the trade negotiations related to trade, and if we needed to have negotiations with other countries on topics like immigration or other topics, then those were handled on a separate track. Mixing the two together makes everything more difficult.
What's likely to become of Mexico's economy, let's say immediately south of the border, should this continue as we expect it next week?
Well, it has the potential to damage the Mexican economy. That means less production, less employment there. It could generate more immigration into the U.S. if our policies wind up making Mexico worse off. And that can actually make the immigration system, the immigration situation worse.
Earlier this week, I spoke with the Tucson Metro Chamber, who indicated that there are some intellectual property issues with respect to China and some of the products that have been purchased here in the United States and perhaps re-engineered in China. Is that part of this?
Absolutely. We do have legitimate concerns about the way China conducts trade. And those concerns should be pursued. The problem is that tariffs are not the right way to do that. You don't solve one problem by first shooting yourself in the foot, right? So we don't want to make ourselves worse off to try and improve a separate situation.
Okay, George, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.